Welcome to part 9 in my series, How This Church Began, which is a part of the larger series, History of the Church and Related Questions. If you haven't watched the previous 8 videos, don't watch this one. Although it'll make sense, you understand it, but it just makes more sense if you're able to follow the other videos in whole. I left off sort of talking about the Dark Ages, literally one of the darkest ages in all of human history, where you have throughout the known world, you have Europe, all these massive different countries starting little churches, sort of being involved in politics. And you have the Eastern Roman Empire, which morphed into the Byzantine Empire, which was its own separate political empire that was mostly Greek Orthodox Christians and Eastern Orthodox Christians, but most of them were wiped out by massive persecution. And now you see the Muslims taking over. And at this point, by 800 AD, the Muslims are fighting. Occasionally you have some of the Western Roman empires. Occasionally you have one emperor would rise up. Maybe he was the emperor over just one section, and he would take over. And then sometimes those emperors would go and try to help sort of save the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. They sort of, even though they fought amongst themselves, they still view themselves as they were all Christians, and so therefore they would still help each other against the Muslims. But eventually the Muslims take over the Byzantine Empire. The Turks, brutal wars fought, and they take over the Holy Land. And so then you have all these different little mini nations. Right around 850 AD, you see some stability start to happen in Europe. A little bit. After about 250, 300 years of mass hysteria and chaos, some stability. Some of the countries begin to stabilize. They're able to protect themselves. They develop language and currencies on their own. Germany is sort of one of the ones that really is able to... and Germany becomes this mixture with the old barbarian tribes and a mixture of some of the Roman Catholics, and they sort of mix together and develop their own sort of, the Kingdom of Germany sort of becomes its own nation at this point, and sort of becomes one of the more stable. France sort of stabilizes. Spain begins to stabilize. Italy begin to see some stability. Some of the northern African countries that had a lot of Roman Empire influence you see some great stability again. Particularly Egypt begins to have a strong sovereign stability at this point. And so you see some of these things, and you see Egypt then begin to do a lot of trading with what was the Byzantine Empire, which becomes the Ottoman Empire. The Muslim empires and Muslim nations, and lots of Muslim influence in Egypt begins to spread throughout northern Africa. And so this is sort of the world going on. And there were very, very few really true, devout, born-again Christians in the time period. This is one of the darkest, most tragic time periods. But you see these pockets. There certainly were Christians that loved God and were born again, definitely in certain pockets. But a lot of the people who attended the churches weren't really Christians, because the church wasn't preaching true gospel. They were preaching political power. They were preaching false doctrines. By this point, a lot of the priests would make up stuff, just make up their own theology, whatever's going to benefit them politically. And so this started happening right around 450 or 480 AD. So you fast forward 400 years to 850 AD. Over 400 years, lots of evolution of society, lots of corruption, and just flat out lying by the church leaders. And most of the church at this point is vastly corrupt in its leadership, in the way they treat people. They begin to sell indulgences, which was basically, if you they begin to preach a thing called purgatory during this time period, where if you die, you don't go straight to heaven. You die, you have to wait in purgatory. Basically, it's a waiting room forever. And if you were begin to preach, if you were a good person and you gave a lot of money to the Catholic Church, because they wanted to motivate people to be good people, to be good citizens of the country. They wanted to motivate people to give money to the church. And so, if you did these things, then you could get into heaven. But even if you were sinful, you could go to purgatory and just wait. And so, like, certain sins had certain time periods, like basically a sentence. And you just go to this all-black waiting room called purgatory after, let's say, 1,000 years, and then God will let you into heaven. So when you die, you go to purgatory first, then heaven. And they begin to sell these things called indulgences, where you could buy indulgences, and then basically you go into the church and say, hey, here's $100. I want to buy an indulgence for my Auntie Rose. My Aunt Rosie died last year. And so the church began to say, if you buy this, and for every indulgence you buy, you can shave a year or so off of their time in purgatory. Don't you love your people, your family member in purgatory? Don't you want to see them get out of purgatory sooner and get to heaven with Jesus? That's what the church began to preach and teach. It was all political corruption that was disastrous. And so this is where you begin to see these indulgences, and then right around 800 or so AD, you got this guy named Charlemagne rises to power in Europe and begins to take over a lot of the countries that used to be a part of the Roman Empire. And then the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, is actually the guy who actually has a lot of political power. You know, right around 800, 850 AD or so, there's a lot of churches, a lot of people that are very, very loyal, a lot of countries loyal to the Pope. And he has a tremendous amount of influence and political power, mostly used for political corruption and selfish ambition. And so basically the Pope says, I'm going to put Charlemagne in power. And Charlemagne's in power for all of the churches in all of the countries where the Roman Catholic Church has influence. And the Pope, this is the very first time, the Roman Catholic leaders have been close to political leaders, but this is the very first time where the Pope basically uses his power and influence to demand that the guy he wants to be in power be named. And he actually names the emperor, and all the armies of the countries that are loyal to the Pope begin to fight wars under Charlemagne. And Charlemagne becomes the most influential leader during the Dark Ages in Europe. And Charlemagne leads massive armies to take over large parts of land. There are many people that begin to think that that maybe the Roman Empire was going to revive again. And then with this revival of sorts, you see some stability in some of these countries where you see many revivals of true Christianity, true Christians sort of rising up and becoming true Christians and fighting against the Catholic Church and some of the things that the Catholic Church was doing that was wrong, and trying to fight against some of the persecution. And a lot of these guys, they still call themselves Catholic because they still believe they were Christian. They said, hey, listen, Catholicism is still the universal religion. Christianity is for everybody. We still want to be Catholic. We just don't like what the Catholic Church has been doing for the last few centuries. So they tried to break away, or not break away, but try to revamp. And you see these little pockets of little mini revivals happening all over Europe and Northern Africa and a little bit in Eastern Europe. And you see some of the stability with this. You see some of these monasteries that were through the Dark Ages begin to become a little more, get a little more money, a little more influence. Some of their writings get to be passed, and you see little mini revivals. But as soon as one of these little mini revivals would cause any priest or leader or religious leader felt that his power was threatened, it would squash it. And they had the power now through Charlemagne, and even after Charlemagne, this new sort of revised Roman Empire would immediately wipe out any of these rebellious Catholics. And the Pope would always say, anyone who is not 100% loyal to whatever the priest tells them to do is a heretic. They're a false prophet, and they should be killed or murdered or thrown in jail. And those are the kind of things that would happen. And this is why the Roman Catholic Church gets such a bad name for being so corrupt for so long, because this is sort of what was going on. And so, you see these things happening, and this becomes what was called the Holy Roman Empire, where there were different countries. Germany was its own country, the Kingdom of Burgundy and France, and there were like several other countries that were separate. They were not all one big country. They were separate countries. They had sort of learned, hey, listen, we can't have one big nation. The empire would fall apart. Each country had their own emperor, but whoever the Holy Roman Emperor was would sort of be, it would sort of be kind of like one guy who'd it'd be like 8 different countries, but they all worked together. They were all allies, and it'd be one emperor over all the countries. And that way he was the leader of the Holy Roman Empire, and the Holy Roman Emperor was accountable underneath the Pope. So the Pope was the big dog, and then it was the Holy Roman Emperor, and then each individual country had their own emperors, or their own leaders, or governors, or officials, or every nation called them something a little bit different. And this is the structure where for the first time, this is right around 850 to 900 AD, where the Pope, for the very first time, becomes pretty much one of the most powerful men, if not the most powerful man on planet Earth. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how some of the popes yielded this power, and talk about the Crusades, and then go into the Renaissance.